Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, it's Mark Graban. Welcome to the podcast. It's episode 520 for November 20th, 2024. My guest today is Bill Remy. He's the CEO of TBM Consulting. In today's episode, we're going to hear a lot of Bill's insights and experiences about lean leadership and operational excellence. We're going to learn how he first encountered lean principles at Allied Signal. We're going to talk about the critical role of communication and employee involvement, the deep connections between safety and quality, and the importance of leadership in driving both transformation and sustaining long-term improvement. So if you'd like to learn more, look for links in the show notes or go to leanblog.org/520. Hi, welcome to Lean Blog Interviews. I'm your host, Mark Graban. We're joined today. Our guest is Bill Remy. He is the CEO of TBM Consulting. Bill is an accomplished business executive and leader who is frequently called upon for his credible voice, honesty, pragmatism, and his ability to leverage operational excellence and continuous improvement for long-term profitable growth. Bill was previously president of Thayer Aerospace. As president, Bill doubled revenue in 6 years, expanded into Mexico, improved profitability and inventory turns. He integrated the supply chain into a web-based pull system, consolidated divisions, and implemented an ERP system. So Bill, before I tell everyone a little bit more about you, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
I got tripped up as a former manufacturing guy. I know the letters ERP, but working in healthcare a lot now, my lips wanted to stop after ER.
Yeah, understandable.
But Bill has also held progressively responsible roles in operations. He was VP of Continuous Improvement at Invensys, VP of Operations at Learjet Bombardier, production manager for Lockheed's Arizona missile facility, and was a materials manager at Allied Signal Aerospace. Bill has both a Master's of Science and a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering from Oklahoma State University, my father-in-law's alma mater also, by the way, Bill. And he serves as chairman of the board of directors for Pancon Corporation, and is on the Oklahoma State University Dean's Advisory Board for the College of Engineering. So again, Bill, thanks for being here. Were you also born and raised in Oklahoma?
No, I wasn't. I was born and lived a good part of my life in Kansas City, but then moved all over the country before I went to college in Oklahoma. I was sort of an Army brat. My dad worked for General Motors, and we got transferred every 18 months. So kind of fairly nomadic for a while.
Yeah. Well, other than the nomadic part, there's something else we have in common. My dad retired after 40 years at General Motors as an engineer. He sometimes listens to these podcasts, so we'll say hi, Dad, if he's tuned in.
Great for him, and I'll say go Pokes to your father-in-law.
Yeah. So there's a lot we can talk about here, Bill. I think an opportunity to talk about some of the work that TBM Consulting has done, and kind of go through a bit of a verbal case study. But as I tend to do here, we learned a little bit about some of your early days, but I always love to hear people's lean origin story, if you will. What's your story of the where, when, why, how you learned about lean?
Sure. It goes back, 32 years now, 33 years when I was working at Allied Signal in the engine business. And I worked on the propulsion engine side of the business. And, we had some really thoughtful leaders in the business at the time who really started to recognize that we needed to think differently about how we made product, right? How we made all the components. And so we spent some time collectively with a group of them and a group of managers, of which I was part of. I was manager of an engineering group at the time, and thinking about what's that look like. And we were at the time, we had read The Machine That Changed the World. We were reading, some of that early literature that was talking about the Toyota production system. So we're talking 91, 92, right? About the same time TBM was founded. What we landed on is, look, lead time reduction, speed is the answer. Making things flow better and faster through production is really the answer.
Yeah.
And what we recognized is things like rework and setups and, all that stuff is today we'd call it non-value added in a lot of ways, but
yeah,
it was the speed bumps that kept you from going faster. When you say, why can't I make a component in 1 week or in 3 days? Well, what keeps you from doing that? Oh, I've got, I always have these reworks, I have these long inspections, so on and so on. And so we also looked at, but we needed to look at the routings and how things flow and begin to think about grouping common flows, if you will, cellular type manufacturing. And so we did that. We split the entire facility into like flows, common flow of equipment, and then could really focus on how do you streamline that lead time, right? Where do we need to reduce setups? Where are the quality problems? What are the things, again, today we'd call non-value added, to really get that lead time compression? And then think about how do you connect it to now how you release material and how you move things. So pull, if you will, right? And we had just tremendous gains the first 2 years. We removed tons of work in process, standardized a lot of things. Our quality got dramatically better. Our delivery to the assembly line got dramatically better. And the productivity overall was better, right? And so we, there was still a lot we didn't know. We didn't fully understand the concepts of standard work as I would know it today. We weren't as formal with pull and material replenishment systems as you might think today. But, for 30 years ago, it's like, okay, we were on the path. And I know the people that work there have still gotten better. And then my journey, I went on to work with TBM a few years later when I was at Learjet and got the insight that TBM brought from true Toyota coaching and TPS perspective. And again, we made some dramatic gains in terms of how you really do parts presentation. Subsequently applied that when I went to Thayer, and we used it as a lever to win business. Because what we demonstrated with customers, because we were a make to print shop, we were a contract manufacturer, right? We were tier 1, tier 2. We learned how you could do short, fast throughput lead times, dedicated production, and then even extended it into customer facilities where we'll manage the finished goods and do kitting and point of use delivery to your line. So we take all of that off your shoulders and simplify how you get from where we either buy or make the parts to where you can now convert them to the assembly. And we had a lot of success with that. And that's where we did the web-based pull, and we started implementing some better replenishment systems, both with the customer we had that was doing a lot of the kitting as well as others. And it was, this was in the 2000 to 2005 timeframe. And then I went to work for TBM in 2005 as a consultant and really was able to hone my craft and to further develop my skills. But it's also, so a pretty good run over the years. But I would tell you, and I think you know this well, you never really know it all. It's a constant journey of, okay, but if you stay focused on the principles and the fundamentals with what you're facing, you can usually find a way to improve it, make it better, and bring people along with you, which is really the key, right?
Yeah. That starting point, I'm kind of picturing, maybe you can fill in some of the detail. The starting point in Allied Signal, I'm picturing like the old functional layout where all the machines of a certain type were together, a lot of batch and queue, MRP, schedule driven, kind of classic starting point.
Exactly. In fact, it was like, all the engine lathes are over here and the CNC lathes are over here and the CNC mills are over here and grinding and so on. What we did as an early part of the initiative is we built one cell around one family of parts as a pilot and said, let's make that fly. Right. And let's learn. So it was our initial value stream, if you will, that was the model line or the model flow that says, let's build this first, use it to experiment, learn, engage people. And we learned a lot from that. And, we learned so much that it got me from leading the team of how to implement all this to down running one of those lines. So it's a good job designing. Now you get to go try and run the animal you created.
Yeah.
Which Yeah, it's more fun. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, how controversial was that model line? I mean, I'm sure there were some people who were nervous, to say the least, about making a change like that, right? Or
A little bit. There was a lot of questions.
Mhm.
And the one thing that I will say that the team did a phenomenal job of is we held plant-wide meetings with every organization, all of the operators on the floor and supervisors, all the material control people, manufacturing engineering, of here's what we're working on, here's where we're at, here's what it's going to look like, answer questions. And we spent significant hours every week communicating. So people knew what to expect. They still didn't fully answer all the questions when we put the first one in place,
Mhm.
but there wasn't the shock and awe of like, what the heck are you guys doing over there? We're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I see. And then as we slowly implemented, commonized some things, it was like, and the guys in the cell that I worked with closest really started to understand this is not about just yelling work faster. This is making us it easier. It's solving problems. We're getting the support we've been asking for. And now this is more fun to work in.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a home run in that sense, but everybody that was involved in that process just did an outstanding job of having the vision, laying the groundwork, communicating, involving people, and let's go see. We knew that very well. Of look, argue all you want in the conference, and we're going to go downstairs and go see what let's go look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's what, I mean, some people would refer to as change management. It sounds like just a lot of two-way communication, not just saying, hey, here's what's coming, brace yourself. But I'd love to hear about that, opportunity for people to ask questions. And to me, kind of jumping back to broader lean principles, to me, that's part of, that respect for people or respect for humanity, however you want to phrase it.
Sure. It absolutely is. I mean, I even said earlier, you have to bring everybody with you. You can't, not everyone will want to come on the journey, and that's okay, but you have to give them a chance. You have to give them an opportunity, and then, let them decide whether they're really willing to try or not. And if they are, then give them the runway to try. If they're giving you an honest try, you need to do that. Right. That's just fair.
Yeah.
And there will be people that journey might be too hard. And so you have to respect that and help them and work with them to help them find a better place, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You also make me kind of reflect, think about that time frame, 32 years ago, as an industrial engineer, I think my early education, even in my undergrad operations class about lean or the Toyota production system, was about things like production scheduling, inventory management, and flow. Like, it was all really good, useful stuff, but it was sort of, an incomplete view of lean. And I think you can only teach so much in a course, and the professors were focusing on some of those basics of why, a flow-based pull system could outperform MRP scheduling any day. And, the challenge wasn't to get better at MRP scheduling, but, I appreciated that early introduction. But then, I think as we all learn more about this over time, you brought up the point about, quality as a speed bump, and how quality and flow are so intertwined. I was wondering if you could share either some of those early reflections or some of the things that were learned and reinforced over time, through other roles that you've had.
Yeah. That's a great point. Quality is, one of the first things you have to get right. The way we think about it today, it's really safety, then quality, because what I've learned over the years is if you walk into a facility and you first get an observation of, what's their safety system and their safety performance look like? What's the environment look like? You generally can there's a corollary or a correlation to what's their quality like.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you see a lot of safety and in unsafe conditions and things, you can now quickly go, well, let me go look at your quality data, and you're going to find a pretty good correlation.
Yeah.
And those are all things that you've got to get right first before you can really push the pedal down hard, right? Because there's no good, mulligans and do-overs are not good. They don't help you.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's interesting in some industries, Mark, you have a tough time getting people to sometimes see embedded rework. It's like, well, no, that's okay because we can do that. A common one is in molding operations where if the injection molded parts aren't good, you can throw them in the grinder and regrind the material and remold it.
Yeah.
Well, but guys, that's rework. If you get it right the first time, you wouldn't use the time and the energy to regrind it, redeliver it, and so on, right?
Right.
Any way you slice it, you're using extra machine hours and labor to get the product. And sometimes it's hard for people to get their heads around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting whether it's manufacturing or even in healthcare where people kind of assume the way it is the way it's got to be. Yeah. Whether it's rework or injuries or patient harm. I learned the mantra working at General Motors, SQDC.
Right.
Safety, quality, delivery, cost, and how it's all intertwined and safety, quality, and delivery improvements or flow improvements lead to better costs. But I guess throw it back to you as a question. Do you have experience working with leaders kind of open their eyes, let's say around safety, that the safety systems and the safety performance can actually be a lot better? Is that a sticking point sometimes, or do you find enthusiasm for let's focus more on safety performance?
I think sometimes yes. Sometimes yes. We run into cases where sometimes people will gravitate to, the industry norm for our business is this, and we're just a little bit better than that, so we're okay. And it's like, no, you really have to be, the number zero. You have to say, well, it might feel aspirational in this moment. The answer is, I can't send anybody home worse than when they came to work.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't measure how many people did I hurt today and say, well, it was less than yesterday, so it's okay. That doesn't fly, right? You can't have that mindset, which is accepting that industry norm or an industry standard. So sometimes that discussion is hard, and it takes some work to get people to really stretch and kind of take away the blinders, if you will, or the lens they look through.
Yeah.
And to also, what would it mean? What does it now make possible for you if no one gets hurt? How does that help your business, your production, and your people if you got to a point where no one gets hurt?
Yeah.
Then you go, oh, well, I'd have less call outs. Oh, I'd have this. And it's like, okay, so that's why we want to do this. It's good for your people. It's good for the business, and there's real money attached to it, and you get better performance. So, let's go down that path.
Yeah.
And, but people don't fundamentally disagree that being safe is a bad idea. They just, if they've never seen zero, it seems too foreign.
I agree with you, and I've run across that a lot. And it's not the theoretical. It's not that they want anyone to get hurt. It's this question of, do we believe there's a path to zero? Yeah. And Paul O'Neill passed away a couple of years ago. Had been a guest on this podcast a long time ago. I think really inspirational story of his leadership at Alcoa. Of saying, look, we're really the things that we need to do to bring safety closer to zero will lead to what he called habitual excellence in quality, delivery, cost, all aspects of the business. And I think this comes to culture where I'm sure part of your evolution and the case study that I've read kind of points to, it's not just technical methods or tools, but it's a matter of culture. And I think engaging people on safety helps people feel so much more committed to the company as partners.
It does. I mean, it becomes behavioral and cultural, right? Of how people think about how leadership and how teams think about what they do at work every day, how they think about what actions they take and what the conditions and adherence to. I mean, this is where you link workplace organization and standard method, standard work to together with safety that says, look, part of the reason we do this is because it's safe, right? And we avoid accidents and we avoid people being injured. And then it rolls over into quality of, well, if we're going to be safe, we can also really focus on getting everything right the first time.
Yeah.
And as you build that culture, it's like all change. Once you get critical mass, it kind of becomes, it takes over and you get enough inertia. And now it really does fundamentally change how people think about their days at work, right? And it's less of a, well, I'm in for the paycheck. It's like, no, you know, you're in, you know, you got skin in the game, if you will. You're part of the team. We need you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, in your travels as a leader or even as a consultant, have you seen situations where, let's say the starting point was a really combative relationship between employees and management, whether labor was part of it or not, you know, where lean contributed to, you know, a more collaborative relationship that way?
Yeah, we've seen that. It's not uncommon, really. You find in some organizations, some facilities, that the relationship has just broken down, right? There's a lack of trust. There's not as much two-way dialogue and listening and true being involved, you know, and because of what we ask leaders to do when you roll lean out and some of the things around daily management, they have to be visible. They have to be involved. And so you remove that reluctance and you really start rebuilding the trust because, you know, I remember in some cases, early Kaizen teams and early of those deployments, and the team would at first be going, well, are we really going to be allowed to make these changes? Like, yes, they've empowered you. You've got to believe, you know, trust that we're going to jump out the door together and the chutes are all going to open. We're going to go and we're going to make the changes. And once you get some of those under your belt and you start the daily management, then people are like, okay. One of the most common things I always hear is, we've been telling people we needed to fix this for years. This is the first time anybody listened.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I found those early Kaizens to be so really easy in a way because you get a cross-functional team of people together around a process or, you know, improving something. They come with so many solutions, you can't even do them all. They already know what the issues are deeply, usually, and you just really are guiding them through a process, and they get there. They're like, oh, this is awesome, right? We actually get to do something, and it's better. So, yeah, but it's not easy. Make no mistake. The whole process is not easy, and you know that well. It's hard. It's not a spectator sport.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to go back to before kind of talking about, you know, some methodology around turning around operations. You talked about how over time you developed a better understanding of standard work. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more there of, let's say, you know, templates and engineering analysis versus some of the cultural elements related to the standard work. What have you learned?
Yeah, I think there's clearly the part that I got smarter about. I don't even know if I'm smart. Just a better understanding. I'm not smarter by any means, but as an industrial engineer, we were taught work measurement methods, right? You know, we all took that class and we're very disciplined time studies and so on.
Yeah.
And what you learned is, that isn't as relevant of an approach anymore. But if you can balance the work and it's reasonable and it's not overly burdensome and you can really document it over time with steps by time and the right tools and methods to use to do the work and get everybody to do that. The single biggest takeaway I think I had from all of it is, you know, and this relates a little bit to turnaround a plant or improving operations fundamentally. You know, if you are getting variation in performance, both in output and quality and things in a given workstation or a given line, the first thing I want to see is, well, how is everybody doing it? In any given step, how many flavors of doing the work do we have? And if it's Baskin Robbins and I got 31 flavors, then, you know, look, first thing I'm going to do, I don't need to make, and I don't need Minitab yet. I want to get some standard work and methods in place, and I want to see everybody do it consistently so I know what I have. And then we can improve it. Then we can do something with it. But until I get everybody to do it the same, I have no idea, what you guys are doing. And I can't pinpoint, why did we get what we got, right? How do we get these results? I don't really know whether they're good or bad. Right?
Yeah.
And so you really have to do that. I worked with a gentleman who used to teach black belt certification, and he was really good. And he's a crack up, and he'd say, look, if the answer is that obvious, you don't need no stinking mini tab. Just go fix the problem.
Right.
And he was great. He's really knowledgeable, but I always enjoyed his humor around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's not overcomplicate things, or if there's this obvious countermeasure, let's go test it, as opposed to, don't force everyone to go through the motions of an A3 that just gets to the point they wanted to be at anyway. There are enough cases where the countermeasures aren't obvious, and we have to go through all of that rigor. But
sure,
I found sometimes that can be overused, or it's intimidating to people instead of drawing them in.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it's back to using the right approach and right methodology, tools, if you will, to solve the problem. And what you're really after is be clear about the problem you're solving and what's it really required to solve it. And can I do some quick, obvious things while I maybe do some longer term things to keep it going, right? And to make it easier and safer and so on. You just, well said. You don't need to overcomplicate things for the sake of it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, again, our guest today, we're talking with Bill Remy, CEO of TBM Consulting. And, there's a case study that you shared with me, and I think it's probably something we can share with the listeners, kind of go through, some method. And I think this is interesting. I love a good framework. This framework around 4 phases of turning around operations. If you could kind of walk us through that, and then kind of maybe talk about an example that featured, as I was reading through there, Kevin Meyer, one of the co-founders of Gemba Academy, when he was still in manufacturing leadership. Kevin's been a guest in the podcast, so Kevin was a part of that as well. But kind of walk through, if you would, these 4 phases, maybe just kind of at a high level, and we can dig into some detail.
Yeah, so there was a client that, and like many, through COVID and post-COVID for a while, was struggling with the issues of their manpower, their supply chain issues, and leading to just productivity in the plant, right? And it had degraded substantially from where it had been prior to COVID and some of the disruption. And we really stepped back and we took kind of a 4-step approach and said, first step is let's just evaluate where everything's at. So let's, if you will, let's get a very clear picture of the current condition, current performance. What are the issues, potential root causes? Where are we at against KPIs, both current and prior performance, to understand, a clear state of where are we at? What's the real current condition that we have? What are the labor and staffing issues? What's the leadership team? Do we have everybody in the right roles to know that we're positioned to now make this better, right? And so I think, in anything as you're evaluating the current condition, you've kind of got to take a 360 view that says, where are we at with people, leadership, right roles, right staffing? Where are we at with assets, equipment, good performance, needs help? Where are we at with raw materials and material supply? And then where are we at with just our KPIs around safety, quality, delivery, cost? And try and line that up and line up root causes or drivers with that. So you now have, okay, we've got it, right? We think we know what we understand. You probably don't know it all, but you have a pretty good view, right?
Yeah. And so, how long? I mean, that's a broad. It's on 3-dimensional, 360 evaluation. How long does that generally take to take a deep dive into, let's say, a facility?
I think it depends on the size and complexity, but it could be 2 to 4 weeks, typically, to do that. Some of that can be done quickly through just give us some of your data. Let us get some baseline data. Let's get baseline performance. Let's go validate some of that. Let's do a lot of time out in the plant, validating data with observations. Let's get some interviews in place, right? Let's go hear from people What are they seeing? What are they feeling? And there's two parts about it too. You're kind of also assessing what's the general state of the people's, how are they thinking about things? Are they down? Are they frustrated? Have they kind of given up, if you will, in some cases, and say, look, this is too hard. I'm just going to ride it out. And so, because that's important as you get on to the subsequent work, right? Of what do you have to do to engage everybody to bring them with you, to bring it back, right?
Yeah.
So it's a 2 to 4 week kind of process.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, all right, now let's, if you will, stop the bleeding or stop the degradation. So let's go into this. We're going to stabilize.
Right.
We're going to try and normalize, stabilize everything. Make sure if we need to adjust people and staffing in certain areas, make sure that if we need people in different roles, that we work on that and get everybody lined up, and make sure there's a clear mission and call to action of here's what we're trying to get done in this part.
Mm-hmm.
So they understand what we're trying to do with them. And it's, it's never to them, but here's what we're trying to get to everybody. And we're going to do this for a while. It could be a month. It could be a couple of months. We may bring in some additional resources to deep dive into known issues,
mm-hmm.
right, that we identified before that need more help. That could be more A3 type work or real focused deep work to get to some of the root causes and issues that we can now fix. Some are longer term. Some you identify, look, there's a chronic, asset care problem that you're not going to fix overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to put some things in place and say over the next few months, we're going to work this out. Even with some extra resources, it might take some months
mm-hmm.
to get equipment condition backed up to where you'd like, right?
Yeah.
And you can be constrained by both resources and just CapEx or expense money to do that, right? You can only spend so fast, right? And in that piece, you're now also starting to work on how do I get a rhythm back into the facility? How do I build a rhythm, a flow, make things so? I learned this from one of my mentors from TBM, a gentleman named Sam Sawyer, and he was one of our founders, and I just had a tremendous amount of respect for him. He's now retired. But his first, forget one piece flow, just make it flow.
Yeah.
Just get flow. And once you have it flowing, then we can work on the other stuff. But you've
mm-hmm.
got to make it flow first.
Right.
And I took that to heart long time. And that makes sense. So that's what we try to do is make it flow. Just get mm-hmm. things to flow, get it to move, start to fix the obvious things. And now once we have some flow, now we can start to say, all right, when we've got people with us and we're stabilizing, and you spend some amount of time in that period, and then you go on to, all right, now let's drive improvement or recovery, if you will. We're going to recover back to the previous condition, the previous level of performance. And what do we have to do to that? And that's going to require another round of what needs to be better, what needs to be improved, what barriers need to be eliminated, what speed bumps, what's in our way, right?
Yeah.
And so that starts to look more of like a continuous improvement environment. So you're doing, improvement focused Kaizen work. You're doing daily management rollouts. You've implemented leader standard work. You've got
mm-hmm.
the layered audits going on, those kinds of things that now you're leveraging that momentum from stabilizing into really improvement cycles
mm-hmm.
until you get back to at least that level where you were, and hopefully better. Right. And then you move them into sustain. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Now you reinforce the short interval management, daily management system of rigorous leader standard work, rigorous auditing and follow-up, standard work audits and follow-up, rigorous quality and problem solving, your daily board reviews of truly not reading the news, but driving actions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that will hopefully go on forever, right? Because that's you've got things on the path, and that now becomes a leadership challenge that they have to hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Wanted to go back and dig a little more into something you talked about, evaluating leaders. Are they the right leaders? Are they in the right place? Do they have the right capabilities or mindsets? How much of that evaluation is a question of who can lead the change versus who can lead in a lean way, if you will, or
Right.
elements of both.
Yeah, I think, and I've seen this in different leaders. I think there's leaders that can lead transitional change, but they're not as effective with the sustain and forever, the incremental. So you may have to think about interim leadership in some cases for some parts of this until you transition to more permanent leadership that can take it all the way home. But leaders that can lead in a lean way have to be, we think about, like they have to have a high bias for action. They have to be willing to try. And that sounds simple, but you have to go out on that shop floor. You have to engage and you have to rigorously follow up and ask questions and rigorously hold people accountable. That doesn't mean being brutal, but it does mean being rigorous around, we had action items. Did we get them done? If not, why not? What do you need? Where do you need help?
Yeah.
And because oftentimes in some of these organizations, you've seen people have asked for help and they didn't get it. So they quit asking.
Right.
And so when you raise your hand or you put an action item on the board to help someone, you've got to deliver on that. You've got to make that accountability for everybody tantamount to what we do every day.
Right. Now, I like hearing about those questions of accountability with support, or digging into the why. How can I help you? And we'll get that help, as opposed to I'm having flashbacks. My first year at General Motors under the old regime, it was accountability followed by basically what the hell is wrong with all of you, which did not feel good and was not real helpful. But that's part of why we ended up with a new plant manager that was more of that style of, we're going to win together. What support do you need? And you'll get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've both seen that, in the early days. If you go back to the 70s and 80s, you were like, yeah, I want you to do this and I'll get you the help. But, then later on, it's like, well, how come you didn't get this done? Oh, you were supposed to give me some help. Oh, well, I figured it out. You just need to get it done.
Yeah.
Like, okay. If I would have known that in the first place, I would have gone and figured it out. But I was, and so you do have to, you have to realize there's a two-way commitment, right? You have a commitment as a leader to facilitate, remove roadblocks, or help get the support and make investments where you need to get people, the help and the resources they need. But at the same time, people have to understand we don't have unlimited resources. So, but you have to communicate that.
Yeah,
I'm going to get you the help, but it's going to be in this time frame because we've got to get this other thing done first.
Yeah, somebody may have to prioritize and make sure people know it's not a no, but a not right now,
right?
Kind of situation.
Yep. But you get tons of credibility with people as that builds and you continue to deliver, right? I mean, there's the analogy about relationships and those things. They're like bank accounts, right? And when you deliver and you do what you say you're going to do, you're making deposits. Trust is building, credibility is building. And when you miss, then that's a withdrawal. And we all know you just can't have more withdrawals than deposits.
Right.
So, it's not hard. You just have to, but it is hard work because it typically is different than how people have been trained, educated, and operated in the past.
Right. Also wanted to dig a little bit more into what you're saying about moving toward one piece flow. And, I think of it's a cliche, the analogy of lowering the river, lowering the water to expose the rocks. When you think about, inventory levels and WIP, and, there are organizations that have gotten themselves in trouble by draining the river too quickly, and then they're crashing into all the rocks. If trying to go to that ideal of one piece flow before machine reliability and quality and things are, before the system is even close to being capable of flowing. I mean, trying to make too big of a leap too quickly causes problems. And I'm kind of reading into, it sounds like you're warning against that, or you've learned to not get people in trouble with the rocks.
No, and it's you're spot on. I mean, it's kind of a fine line, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a very small gap between pushing the envelope a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
having that bias for action, trying, working with it, and pushing with not only to speed of product, but speed to implement, speed to make change.
Mm-hmm.
Versus, well, let's not go too far because we still got to deliver at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
you can't say I didn't deliver because we were too busy changing the line. Well,
Yeah.
okay, that's not going to work.
Right.
And so there's a fine line there, but I think people underestimate, I think, their teams and what's possible a lot of times. I think many times people, the vast majority of the time, people and teams will rise to the occasion. They'll step up. If you give them the support, they will step up and they will make it work. And there will be some workarounds, and you may have to, we've got one now where, look, you might have to overwhelm it with some resources up front, support people to just solve the little glitchy things that come up while we're trying to run it, but do that, but make it run it at rate. And the closer you get to that, the better you'll be. And because you're uncovering those things, but at a rate, it's not too slow, but not too fast. You're kind of right in that comfortable discomfort of this is a little scary, but we're working it, we're doing it, but I don't know.
Yeah. And it seems like, exposing some of the rocks means I've never done this with a kayak, but I'm trying to picture like having some rocks exposed means you could steer around them as opposed to smashing into a wall. Like,
yeah, that's right.
Challenge versus catastrophe. Where's that sweet spot?
Yeah, and it's the number, it's the size of the rocks, it's what you run into. Sometimes it's just a lot of little things, and you just have to, get some help. You hope before you really try to move to the one piece or running attack that you need to, you've uncovered all the really big rocks, the things that are going to just clobber you, and you're down to the smaller ones, and you can navigate and course correct quickly to do that. But yeah, it is. I mean. And you don't ever want me in a kayak on a fast-moving river with a lot of rocks.
Yeah,
I'll be visiting your healthcare friends.
Yeah. One other thing that was really interesting, Bill, in that case study document was a section about warning signs. Warning signs that a plant is in trouble. Like, if you've got, let's say, a data point, and I know 2 data points are not a trend, but let's say there's a blip in performance. How do you evaluate? Okay, is that something sort of temporary and fixable, or is there more trouble where that data point is maybe the beginning? How do we prevent that from being the beginning of a really bad trend or shift in performance? How would you look?
I think a lot of that has to do with how well are you working to KPIs and performance measures and things at the point of impact versus plant level KPIs that you look at monthly. So it's back to, I guess, the timeliness and granularity with which you're looking at the numbers and combining that with going out and seeing what's really happening and getting some, if you will, inside your organization, domain expertise and experts and people on the floor to say, all right, what's going on here? And also be very careful of accepting, oh, it's okay, it's a one-off. And then next month, yeah, it's okay, it's a one-off. It's like, too many one-offs are a trend. That's not one-offs anymore. That's repeatable history.
Yeah.
But I think if you, and it may require that you ask to look at the data deeper and go probe deeper to really understand, I'm seeing smoke. I'm really trying to figure out if there's a fire there or not. Or was it a little thing and we put it out and that's the legacy? You can put, the other thing you can do is, I think, drive some accountability for people. It's like, okay, can you go look at that and let's frame a problem statement for you to go understand what this issue was and then look around the plant and do we have it in other places? Because it seems like it might be common, especially with the problem with a common piece of equipment that now is across multiple lines, those kinds of things. So there could be indicators that you say, well, I don't trust this yet. Let me go see. You have to be a bit of an optimistic skeptic, if that makes sense. It's like, I believe we'll always do well, but I just don't. I don't trust that there's one-offs. I don't trust this was just a blip. Prove it to me.
Yeah.
Get data. Get root causes. Prove to me it really was a blip. We've solved it, and we've put a permanent fix in place. That I'm not going to hear about this again.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think being an optimistic skeptic helps us be comfortably uncomfortable.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Food for thought on, yeah.
But there is amount of, if you're really comfortable, I was talking about this with a colleague at another firm today. The thing about manufacturing, you rarely ever get these windows where things are all clicking and the plant's running really good. And you're like, wow, we're really hitting it. Yeah. And it's like, that's when you should be afraid, because something's probably about to change on you.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to have your eyes and ears open to like, okay, guys, because those things just don't last forever, right? Sure. And you have to take advantage of that momentum. You can't wish for things to go wrong, but generally things will change on you, and something will, and so you have to be really rigorous around. If you do see things happening in the plant, you see things in metrics, you start to pick up on indicators. It's like, hang on, let's not ignore this. Let's not downplay it, or let's really go understand what's going on here, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's how you get in trouble in a way, right?
So Bill, I have been with TBM almost 20 years now, and exposure to them in previous roles. How long have you been CEO now?
12 years.
12 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's TBM's origin story? I've heard of TBM for a long time, but I either don't know or I've forgotten. Like, what are some of the origins of the firm?
The origins, we had 4 founders, and TBM actually stands for time-based management. Mm-hmm. And we were founded with the principle that time is your most important asset, because once time's gone, right? Once the day is over, I can't go back and redo that day. So I've got to manage my time and what happens, to make sure I get the best performance I can. And once I'm done, I can't, again, you can't go back and do it over. And combined with that, lead time reduction, amazingly, coincidentally with where I started 30 years ago, is that's the focus. It's like, so how do you create velocity in the business? And then how do you leverage that to really grow sales and earnings? We really start with the business view of how do you drive performance through lean operational excellence to drive sales and revenue, and not as much of a cost savings type approach, right? Mm-hmm. You obviously get better cost performance because you get better productivity over time, right? But it really is about driving sales and earnings, because if you create capacity and now can say, we tell operations leaders, it's like, look, we want to create enough capacity and capability that now we put this all back on the sales team that says, you've got to go sell product. You've got to innovate, create product. We can support you. We can deliver everything you need. Go sell it. Mm-hmm. And what you find is those sales fall through at much better incremental performance, right? Mm-hmm. And you end up growing earnings faster than sales in terms of percentages. And that was our core premise. We were linked with early days Shingijutsu and some retired Toyota executives. That was our roots. We were the U.S. arm of Shingijutsu. We worked with them for a number of years before we each went on our own ways.
Yeah.
And since then we have been, on this journey, and we remain true to staying in manufacturing and supply chain distribution businesses. Mm-hmm. We think that's our sweet spot. And then trying to build out just how do we engage more deeply, I think the last few years on the human capital and the leadership and people side of it, mm-hmm. as well as different things in supply chain and practices around asset care and things to just continue to help find ways to make productivity in a facility. Yeah. We're really now trying to back away and say, if I looked at a helicopter, if I'm in a helicopter looking over the whole plant, what's every opportunity that I can find to make that facility more productive? Mm-hmm. It could be clearly in the material transformation process. It could be in transactional processes. It can be how we, leadership roles, how effective is our leadership. It can be in energy waste and sustainability opportunities. Like, go look at what you're throwing away, right? Why do we do that? Can we find ways to be more energy efficient, which that helps all kinds, and some of that can be operationally driven. If we have like a lot of heat treat furnaces, how we run them, how we run cycles. But then there's other things you can do. And so it all drives productivity in some form.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talk about, maybe a final question for you. Talk about that helicopter view and seeing a facility or a business. Your career seems to be split in pretty equal parts between being in industry and then being a consultant. At some point, do you have sort of I don't know if it's a satellite instead of a helicopter, but some sort of view across an industry or across manufacturing? I'm curious what you see or what you've learned about lean that's become more clear as an outsider looking in and helping people.
I think that's a great question. I think, there's a differentiator of how organizations think about, we'll call it lean or operational excellence or just continuous improvement. If they view it as a way that in their operations, their supply chain, it can be viewed as a weapon to drive their performance in the market and drive business performance, they do better. Those organizations typically outperform. If they view it as a kind of an add-on, it's another thing we do, it's a program, but we don't really tie it to month over month, year over year performance improvement, and we don't tie it to how we serve markets and customers, then it's a lot less effective. You'll get some small incremental wins, but you'll have a tough time tying it to the bottom line.
Right.
I've seen we've had some great clients over the years. We've had some for some very long-term tenures, and I've seen the ones that embrace it as a weapon, embrace it as a strategy, as a weapon to drive that revenue and earnings and their place in the market.
Right.
And they recognize that it's also not a short-term journey. This is like a forever journey. There's no finish line on this stuff because of all the changes that come at you, right?
Right.
And so I think for me, that's the differentiator of really, where do you lie in that spectrum? If you're more viewing it as, this is my key strategic weapon. And I do mean, weapon sounds harsh or strong, but it is. It's my responsiveness, my ability to perform at quality, delivery, safety levels, lead times really becomes a differentiator for my organization as opposed to not.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very well said. So yes, it's not doing lean to do lean. It's solving problems and strengthening the business. Yeah. Not just now, but positioned for better performance down the road, and saving jobs instead of slashing jobs in a cost-cutting mode. And that's one thing I love about lean. As you were saying, it leads to lower cost, but that's different than quote unquote cost cutting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about consulting, the one thing because of the roles I've had to make those decisions about, do we let people go and what do we, and I hate that. That's the part of, when you look back on your career, those are the things that's like, that's just brutal. That is the worst thing in the world to have to deal with. Because how you're impacting people's lives, and it's horrible.
Yeah. Right.
So you'd much rather find a way to look, how do we make this work and not have to, end up in a position to let people go. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's fix the business and not just recover, but grow.
Yeah, that's right.
The best situation.
Absolutely. And that can be a hard nut to crack at times, but people get there.
Yeah. I mean, I got to visit a factory recently. I don't get to do that as much as I would like, but they were talking about how they increased throughput, they improved quality, they got the backlog down, and they could go to sales and say, hey, you sell it, we can build it. We're not.
Yeah. Exactly. We've made it your problem.
If the bottleneck shifts from production and supply chain to sales, hopefully they're going to continue growing and taking market share. So
yeah.
But yes, it does make a big difference. So I want to thank again our guest Bill Remy, CEO at TBM Consulting. I'll put links in the website to Bill's bio, the TBM Consulting website. I'll invite people to go check that out. So Bill, this has been a really nice conversation. Thanks for sharing some of your experiences, some of the TBM approach and perspectives. It's been great.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Mark. And you know what? I will give you an open invitation. If you want to go see some plants of ours that we're working in, you're always welcome to come along.
All right. I'm going to take you up on that. Thanks. Thanks,
Happy
Bill.
to have you.
All right.
Appreciate your time today. It was a joy.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.
Hey, podcast listeners, I'm excited to announce the release of the audiobook version of my new book, The Mistakes That Make Us, Cultivating a Culture of Learning and Innovation. Listen and dive into powerful insights on fostering growth through mistakes. Whether you're a leader, entrepreneur, or just trying to get better at learning from mistakes, this audiobook is for you. Get it now on Audible, Amazon, and Apple Books. Visit mistakesbook.com for more info.